Welcome to No Nonsense Nonprofits. Hi, I'm Sandy Ray, founder of Sandra E. Ray CPA, where we alleviate financial headaches so that you can create a bigger impact. Today, we're going to be talking about 1099 reporting and compliance. Filing the returns is coming up next month. As you can probably tell, it's December here, and we've got 1099s that need to be filed in January. We've got lots to cover, so I'm just going to dive right in. First, I just want to do a general overview of the 1099 forms. There are two that are the most common forms that are used for most businesses. There's the form NEC, which is used to report non-employee compensation. This is our independent contractors and our freelancers. We're going to report their compensation on the 1099 NEC. The other form is the 1099 miscellaneous, where we're going to report things like rents, prizes, medical payments, and other types of payments. That covers a multitude of types of payments, and that's why it's another common form that we use. Now, these forms are used to report payments made by a business to a payee, and the payee can be an individual, a partnership, and possibly an LLC. The forms are sent to both the payee on the form, they're called the recipient, and to the IRS. Now, I want to talk to you about some compliance rules for this. For the NEC and all of the other forms, it's really good to stay up to date on what the guidelines are for proper reporting. So you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with the rules by reading the instructions of the forms. There's a couple of notices and things like that I'm going to mention later that are very specific to these forms that will help you stay up to date. And just keep in mind that you may have other forms that need to be filed in addition to the NEC and the miscellaneous form. We've got the 1099 DIV for dividends, 1099 INT for interest, 1099K for our credit card companies to report payments to people who've accepted credit card payments. Those are all going to be forms that are covered under this. There's many more. Those are the most common. But to ensure that we have the correct recipients, that we're collecting the information and reporting the 1099s on, all of these forms require us to get a Form W-9 from the vendor. Or if you have independent contractors or freelancers in foreign countries, you may need a different document. Generally, it's the W-8 series, and you'll have to look at the treaty for that country to find out what the requirements are, if there are any. We're going to have to be very particular about how we track the amount that we've paid to these vendors. As many of you know, the threshold for reporting is $600 or more. So do we pay the vendor $600 or more? But what sometimes we forget is we're excluding those payments that we made on our company credit card or through a processor like PayPal. Those credit card companies and PayPal are required to report the payments made through them to the vendor directly. So we, as a business, are excluding them from the payments that we make. So we're only looking at cash, check, debit card, Venmo is one that we're going to actually do the 1099 for. Where PayPal is going to send the 1099, Venmo is not going to send the 1099K, and we have to do that. Also, when we're looking at this, did we have to do any backup withholding during the year? We need to know the amount that we withheld, not only the payments that we made to the vendor, but the withholding has to be reported on these documents as well. And then finally, we have a new e-filing threshold. If you're filing at least 10 1099s, then you have to e-file. And I'm not talking 10 NECs and then 10 miscellaneouses. No, it's combined. So if you have 7 NECs and 5 miscellaneouses, that gets you to 12. You have to e-file everything. We've talked a little bit about non-employee compensation. Those are independent contractors, our freelancers. And again, those get reported on an NEC. We really have to be careful looking at those W-9s, making sure that they've marked either individual, partnership, or taxed as an individual or a partnership. Now, the corporations, if they're taxed as a corporation, that's not a recipient for the 1099. We're going to be looking at payments like rents, prizes, and I love this one on the 1099 miscellaneous. If you paid cash for fish, you have to report that on a 1099 miscellaneous form. I just wanted to include it because I thought it was funny. Most of us in what we do as nonprofits are not going to have that. There is an exception. We have of course, that $600 threshold that for 1099s. Again, if you are working with non-US contractors, that $600 exception or that threshold, $600 does not apply. You need to report every payment. And another thing on these 1099s is we have to be very careful that we're putting the name and the tax ID number on there as they do the W-9. Otherwise, we may get a 1099 mismatch notice or a B notice. The IRS in their system will be matching names and tax ID numbers, and if they can't match it up, we're going to get notice. We're going to get a notice. So if it was a simple clerical error, there's probably nothing that we have to do except fix our vendor record. If there is an issue with the vendor's W-9, or we don't have a W-9, then there's some very specific B notice requirements regarding obtaining that W-9. And if we cannot follow those requirements, then we'll have to withhold from future payments for that vendor. And that's that backup withholding. So be very careful that not only you're receiving those W-9s, but that information gets entered into your system accurately. And then again, the reminder of the e-file for 10 or more forms have to be e-filed. Some key deadlines I want to talk to you about for 2024. The magic date for me, and the easiest thing for me to do, is to remember everything's due January 31st. And that is true for the recipients. Their 1099s have to be postmarked by January 31st or emailed or available on the portal that you provide. Whatever it is that you're doing for them, that's the January 31st date. But for your documents to the IRS, January 31st still applies for those 1099 NECs. But when we're talking about the 1099 miscellaneous, that's February 28th. And other forms have different dates. So you're going to have to look at that. So my recommendation is just plan on having them done by January 31st. If you don't have them done by the filing deadline, or there's inaccuracies in the form, there are penalties associated with that. Penalties can range from $60 per form to up to, I think it's $300 per form. The maximum that can be charged to a small business is $232,500. That's a penalty that's unacceptable. I suppose if you have so many forms that your penalty is that large, I don't know if I would consider you a small business or not, but that's the threshold. If you're not considered a small business, it's up over $660,000, the maximum for the year. And like I said, the penalties range on what the penalty is and when you get the issue resolved. So like within the first 30 days, the penalty is lower. Once you get to August 31st, there's a range of penalty in there. And beyond August 31st, you're going to be paying the maximum penalties. So it's crucial to have the information correct and on time. And to do that, I recommend that we talk about some automation and technology solutions. You can automate your 1099 filing by integrating it with your accounting software or some other type of software. Maybe you're using something to a third party to help you process your vendor payments. So that can be very helpful. Using this can help us to prevent fraud using these processes, ensure the accuracy of the forms, and streamline the collection of the W-9s, because maybe your processes say that you have to have a W-9 before you can make a payment. So use automation as much as you can. Obviously, that software will help you with the e-file with the IRS. Make sure that it does that. So that kind of brings us into our talk about best practices. Now, for me, the best practice, the most important one, is preparing for 1099s all year long. And that starts with having a new vendor approval policy. Now, we're small. Sometimes the person signing the checks is the person procuring the vendors. That's fine. But we need to have a policy in place that says who is an acceptable vendor for our organization and what do we have to do to go through an approval process. Whatever you and your board decide is adequate. There's no rules about this, but I would recommend that these policies include the collection of a W-9 form, signed W-9 form from the vendor, that you get permission to email a 1099 to the recipient. That 1099 includes their tax ID number. And what's really funny is many times these people will send a W-9 through the email that has their tax ID number on it, and then they think twice about getting their 1099 that way. So you may have to think about what's the process that you're going to be collecting those W-9s, and this is where your software can come into play, or maybe there's a portal or just good old snail mail to get these out. And I recommend that you get this permission and the W-9 prior to making a payment. Quite frankly, that's when we have the leverage. Other than that, we just have to keep on requesting this information. And maybe we have to say, okay, we're going to send a 1099 out with missing TIN, and we're going to get a B notice because of that, and we're going to have to start withholding on all your future payments. So that's a little bit of leverage as well, but I think we really don't want to get to that point. We just want to do it in the beginning, make it part of our process for new vendors. And again, using that accounting software helps us with those data entry errors, to avoid those, making sure that we're e-filing, we have a process to e-file those forms. Another thing I want to talk about in best practices is ensuring that the payments are properly coded. As we said before, if you're doing a cash, a check, a debit card, those are the forms of payments that we're putting on our 1099s. If it's a credit card or a payment app like PayPal, the PayPal and the credit card company are putting those payments on the 1099K. So we want to make sure that we're dividing those properly and our system is not picking up what's going on the 1099K. I recommend you take time now in November or December to run a practice run to see what you're missing. That way we're not in this time crunch the second, third week of January, because we're all so busy with 1099s, W-2s, budgeting, closing year end, if you're December year end. We're super busy. So let's run a preliminary report and see what information we're missing. And let's get it now instead of waiting until January 15th to request it, or even the 31st. Another thing I would like to recommend to you is to stay informed. There are news releases from the IRS or your state government that may affect 1099s. Read the instructions. There is the IRS, I'm going to read this from my notes here, IRS General Instruction for Certain Information Returns for 2024-2025. That is an actual document on the IRS. That covers pretty much everything. Then I would recommend that you read the instructions for the forms 1099 NEC and 1099 miscellaneous, because those are the two most common. And then finally, there's a notice 2024-2025 for e-filing threshold rules and penalties. Make yourself aware of what's going on there. If you don't want to spend all that time reading, take an update webinar. There's all kinds of 1099 update classes that happen in November and December. or ask your CPA or tax professional. And then finally, my last tip is if you need paper forms to send to those recipients or send into the IRS, order them early from the IRS. They are free. If you haven't done it already, do that today or this or tomorrow before you leave for the holidays so that they'll be back. You'll have them in your office when you return. So that's my summary. Remember, you're responsible for your company's tax compliance, and it's time to begin preparing. Review those records, ensure that you have all the necessary forms completed and submitted on time. Consult with your tax professional and stay ahead of your potential issues. Remember, non-compliance can lead to substantial fines, and the best practice of all, think about 1099s all year long. I hope this was helpful for you. And if you have any questions on this or other topics that you'd like us to discuss, please put that in the comments below. We always appreciate your likes, and I want to thank you for joining me today. Remember, creating a bigger impact starts with stopping the nonsense. If you're dealing with nonsense in your nonprofit organization, we'd love to help you cut through the noise.